Okay, so welcome back everybody. This is the third in our series here. Again, this information I present, just information, and hopefully it'll trigger something in people and awaken certain things. We've been kind of following this basic book here, the so-called quadrivium, four main subjects that were the topic of a high education for a long, long time, proportions and geometry and so on. Now, I'm going to take it a little bit deeper here because we left off when we were talking about transmutation and transfiguration, because what happens is we start with the unity. That's the whole concept of the cosmos. We represent it by a sphere, and then we have our little point in the middle of it, and we're trying to explore this cosmos. If we have our own identity, we might say, and you can symbolize that by the sun that's used in astrology and tables, also signify an atom. But that static situation of unity, basically there's replication and it starts to reproduce. So what you have is there's a number of different symbols that were used to express the beginning of growth. Well, this one is very familiar with everybody. It's called the yin-yang. Very, very profound symbol, but basically we're having a spin here, see, and you're having a duality as well. You start to have a spin, and the other shape that's very, very important and was used in so many different things, it symbolizes the very beginning of the growth, which is like the egg. You see, when that bubble, that cell is in or whatever, it starts to expand, and then it gets to a point where it cannot, like two bubbles of water, they connect and then they merge, and when they split out they make two smaller bubbles. A very, very profound principle in nature, the egg. Basically, this is a really important word, the egg, the nucleus. So it starts to grow and it starts to split. And then you have the multiplication, and we actually didn't cover in the last one the 1 and the 2 and the 4, because actually a lot of times you have like one thing divides and then it becomes 2 and then that becomes 4 and so on. So we're talking about the transmutation, and that's like a profound concept in all of life. We can't live without that transmutation. Things are growing, we eat food, and it converts and it transforms from one thing into another, and without that we wouldn't have this glorious universe. So everything is in a state of transformation, and there's symbols that we use to represent that. Now, as I said, you take these simple principles and you start thinking, and you start having some abstract ideas about, what's involved in going from 1 to 2. I mean, we see it in our when you give birth and you have like one person, and then out of them comes another one, like, wow, that's amazing. So there's profound metaphors, you might say, from the microcosm to the macrocosm about, even in our daily lives, we end up using symbols that are based on some of this really, really basic stuff. And this is a book that I won't get into it very deeply here, but there's just so many, many different symbols. Archetypal ideas, shapes. You're talking about shapes that represent something, that have that jogs our brain, like even like a sphere. We see a sphere, it's so fundamental. There's something, you hold a sphere in your hand, there's just something about it. It's like equal on all sides. There's no texture almost, you mean. So there's profound things that are symbols, and birds, for example, that's an amazing profound symbol. What does a bird symbolize, you see? Now, a lot of these kind of things end up in people's dreams, and they end up in people's art and so on, and their stories. Because, again, there's the very basic principles of something like this, but then you have like an expanded, you can have a whole bunch of different kinds of products that were, and chemicals that are made with this type of shape, or crystals or so on. But when it gets to a larger scale, you have like flowers, and then you start to see the metaphor as it expands. Again, here's, for example, a shell, and you have the nucleus inside, and the shell's holding it. This is the same principle. You have the Vesica Pisces. So we'll get into that later, but there's a lot of symbols, and all of these things you can get into through your own. People have dreams, people observe things, and so on. So it's very, very fascinating. Now, I'll just touch on this book here. We're touching on transmutation, alchemy. The whole idea of alchemy is moving from one state to another. And in the classic alchemy, there's materials. Of course, there's a metaphysical alchemy of transcending our own being and our own personality and so on. But then there's the chemical alchemy that literally chemistry is in the word alchemy. It's the idea of combining materials. Now, there's been many, many examples from ancient times. They made concrete and different kinds of substances and medicines and so on from amazing things that they made in the past, somehow by combining materials, whether it was the paint that they used and so on. So alchemy involves an awful lot of symbolism, and it got really peculiar because people were trying to represent a process that maybe they did know a lot about or didn't know, but they were theorizing, and some of them maybe knew. But there definitely is transmutation. There's transmutation of elements. The universe started like nothing and became hydrogen. That's what we're told. And then there's all these other elements that came along, and the matter, the infinite energy became subdivided and subdivided and so on until it became all these different materials and elements. But anyway, this is a very, very fascinating, the way they demonstrated, the way they tried to illustrate it. It gets really, really complicated, but basically, again, you see in some of these very complicated drawings, you see some very basic symbols. You see, you have the flask here, and inside the flask there's something growing. It's like the egg, there's something inside. So again, try to use your intuition and look around and watch for the transformation. You see how a little egg becomes a tadpole, and how'd that happen? So it's all just an amazing, amazing process. Now, I want to get a little bit more into talking about energy, because energy, again, we have to understand everything's in motion. So these are static symbols, and we look at them and we say, well, okay, what do we see a representation of? Well, for example, you say when you blow bubbles, you might see interlocking spheres, you might see reflection, and you can see all different kinds of things in nature that you see how shapes are assembled. You see, and then you start looking at your own body like, oh my goodness, like, how did I get here? You got here through an infinite combination of a whole bunch of amazing little processes and little tiny chemicals and shapes and so on. Now, because everything's in motion, we need to be talking a lot more about vibration and frequency, and that's a very profound subject, and there's many different avenues. You can get into the light side of it, you can get into the colors and the ultralights and the low vibration, the ultrasound, and so on. There's all different ways to explore vibration. The nice thing about vibration is there's so many patterns, and again, the patterns, you see, we're told by ancient teachers that there's 7 so-called rays, and there's certain broad frequency bands that stream through the cosmos. Because everything, again, there's a word I want to write down is called involution, and evolution. Basically, the concept in esoteric teachings was, let's say, you go from the pure energy, the darkness, the ultimate absence, the void. That's another very powerful word, that the void. They used to call it in the Hindu tradition the kala, the ultimate, the unspeakable absence, totality, whatever. Just you can't even comprehend it. But basically, that soil of the universe, you might say, that substance, you might say, that just unfolds and starts involving. Basically, it starts to make the little atoms and the different elements, and then you have what various kinds of beings and small beings and bigger beings and various processes that go on. And you have, in the theory of the cosmic esoteric, you have the involution, where spirit or energy becomes slowly into matter and becomes a darker and deeper and stronger matter, or denser matter, you might say. And then you might say, like, when it gets to a point where, say, these plutonium and elements like that, you have like they start to just radiate, and then they dissipate and dissipate and dissipate, and then they go back. Now, again, on a broader scale, in human beings, the idea of a soul that might, we come from our consciousness manifests into different types of matter, and then, it comes back, and that's the whole idea of the ultimate God, you might say, the generator, operator, destroyer. It breathes in and it breathes out. There's something in the word the Hindus they call it pralaya, where there's something that the universe takes a rest, you might say, but it applies to anything, any big cycle. There's an in-breathing and an out-breathing. There's a expansion and then there's a contraction. There's an involution where it becomes matter and then it goes back to spirit. There's an endless flow in this toroidal shapes here. Is one way it happens, where something is like you can get the concept that there's something moving here, just like our breath moves, see? So we're talking about transformation, and one of the most amazing things about our lives is that we're transforming. Every day we take in breath and we take in food, and we just, magic happens. So when you see what's really going on, you start getting into the subtler forms of energy. And we want to, like, for example, a lot of times we don't think about energy. But when you look at, say, a car, the car is just an object. It's just there, but it might have heat energy. It might have some light going on there. It might have some sound going on there, some vibration. And everybody's pressures going on. So there's a whole lot more going on in our existence related to energy and unseen things and the smallest things and the tiniest things, the tiny little frequency. We can't see light. The light is so millions and billions of times a second, but it affects us. It makes us grow. You see, it's this cosmic, the subtlety. We need to get into the subtlety, and that's what meditation is. We get quiet within ourselves and we start to feel our own unity. Another word that we need to put in here is this big word here, space. Space. The tradition of the ancient teachings that space is an entity, not when we say look up there, that's the space, but I mean the space within everything is the non-dual thing. It's the substance, you might say, that has no division. There's just, you can't speak about it. That space, in that space is a consciousness. This is what the yogis tell us. This is what we can experience in our own being when we meditate. We can feel that space inside us that has no dimension and it has no duality to fight with or compare to. It's just the silent existence of consciousness that is like the soil from which we as beings grow out of. Our body comes out of this physical body, comes out of this physical world and the dust and the water and so on, but then our spirit comes out of this kala, this deep oneness, this deep space our awareness, that space is in every atom in our body, see, that consciousness, so we've really gone from a very simple thing to something very profound, and we need to look at, again, who's perceiving. This is a very, very important subject because we're talking about the different proportions and all these things, but we need to talk again about our own awareness, because our awareness is how we even navigate all this stuff. Without our awareness, there's nothing. So we're getting back to that one point there where we started here, that one dot. What is that one point? What is that little point of our existence that we say, I am? I am. I don't have to put anything after that. I just say, I am. I'm aware, and I can observe and perceive, but I don't have to identify. You see, the problem we have a manufactured identity that we associate with different things, our senses, you might say. You say, well, this is my home, this is my this, my body, this is this, but we don't really own it, really. That's the odd thing. We don't really own anything. And the yogis and the teachers say, look, if you can just get that space, if you just feel that one individuality, that non-duality, that existence, without attaching a label to it, without attaching what you own or anything, or your color or anything, just you're existing, and that's that point. And then what can you do? The point that our existence represents, like, well, even in one room, it's a vast amount of things to explore. I look around my own room, and I could explore this one room for months and months and months and years. Read all the books. So that awareness is just, it's a symbol. It's a symbol of a simple point. Say, okay, we have something it's undeniable, something that we are conscious, we're existing. It's extremely profound. So what are we going to do with that? Now, the whole idea is to start looking into, again, as above, go below. Look in nature and start making analogies and metaphors and symbols, and then see how you can transform your own awareness into something in which a lot more dots connect. It's so exciting when you learn things, because, again, about education, I never got an advanced degree. And there's pros and cons about that. But yeah, I certainly admire people who have been through all that process and done all that work. But at the same time, we have to remember that there's a lot to know in this world, and if you get too narrow, then you're missing a lot. And sometimes you're missing a whole lot. And there's scientists in the past, there's many different stories of people who just got so focused on one thing, they totally overlooked another aspect of science. So you can't make all of science into just a bunch of formulas unless there's something real attached to those formulas. And again, something that's very, very overlooked in our daily life is how important the subtle things are. It's spring right now, and the sun has changed its degree and its heat level, and next thing you know, everything's turning green. The flowers are popping out, and the bugs are coming out, and everything's happening. The fish are going on, and the bears are coming out of their caves, and everything's happening just because the light came up. Certain kinds of frequency that we the lights, it's very profound. See, the amount of light that's showing, that's shining, and the angle that it's on, and so on. So, using our awareness to let go for a moment and identify with nothing. Just don't grab with our mind onto any ideas of anything, and then that's when the real downloads happen. Then you start to see, you start to see without a reaction. See, this is what the yogis called perception without judicial reasoning. In other words, you don't think, you just perceive. Boom, get it. And it's not that difficult, because we forget. The kids learn that. They have to. When animals learn that when they're young. I mean, they just have to be so aware, because man, they miss one thing and mama's gone over here or whatever. And when we're young, a lot of our perceptions are so instantaneous. We say, okay, I get it. So somewhere along the line, we introduce this thinking and how we have to think everything through and memorize everything. But again, we'll talk about that in another video. But having a perception without reacting to what you see, it's very difficult. But it opens up a lot of doors. It's like having a big, huge field of vision. You can see a lot more and perceive a lot more. Now, I'm going to cover a couple of quick books here. This one here. I highly recommend this book, The Alphabet That Changed the World. And it was talking about the shapes of the Hebrew alphabet and how they originally were designed to, when you made the shape with your hand, they were illustrating various geometric things. Very, very amazing, profound concept, and it's very well illustrated here in this very complex book about how a lot of the priests and so on, they really didn't know, the rabbis, they didn't really know what, they were just repeating, okay, this is you make this shape and you do this and whatever. But originally, profound knowledge was passed down by saying, okay, well, this particular movement or this particular hand position means this and this, and profound mathematical and abstract concepts could be conveyed in that manner and written down on tablets or whatever, and that's what they did. So they designed these letters of the Hebrew alphabet to demonstrate actual shapes and geometry in nature. It's very, very profound. I can't really get into it here, but the guy who wrote it is his name is Stan Tinnen. Definitely got to look that guy up. So a lot of these simple concepts come to play in our life, and it's so fun to observe because you can observe them gardening or cooking, and when you're cooking, you're transforming materials. It's a very profound thing. There's a lot of chemistry. We take it for granted. We just slap the butter on there and do that, but there's a whole lot of transformation and real amazing chemistry and alchemy going on when we cook. So take a moment here and pause. I got 20 minutes on this video. I don't want to make them too long, but I try to fill up the videos with other information when I'm talking, so that it's not just about what I've written down and diagrams in the books I'm showing, but by tuning ourselves to be a little bit more tuned to subtle things. That has to do with cleaning your body. That's some of the yogic things. Okay, clean your body, make it not be so, erratic and so on. And then when you become like a mirror inside, you're not attached to anything. You just meditate. Let go of everything, every possible thing you can think of, and not think of, just let go and be, and like pretend you're like a balloon and float. Then all the things that are in nature, all the profound things that the universe is like a book. You see, if we observe it with our own increased perception, all these books came from people who perceived. They perceived and they thought, and they took one step at a time, and they assembled their knowledge. And that's what I hope people to do, because we get taught, we go to school, and someone dictates to us, so here, better memorize this because we got a test on Friday, whatever. And then you're missing something about the wholeness. Again, it comes back to a certain unity. There's a cosmic unity, and oneness is the cosmic reality. That's the phrase I put out there. But from a point of view of feeling an inner oneness, and when I say oneness, I mean like we have our oneness, we can't like identify with the entire universe, you see, because we're not there yet. But we can certainly feel, just like if you're in the ocean, you can't feel the entire ocean. You don't know all the ocean, but you have enough of a feel of the ocean that, hey, I'm in the ocean, I'm in that vast unity, I'm floating, I'm feeling, I'm seeing, I'm feeling, and all that. So the same way with meditation, we get into a deep place, and then, we're not like, God, but we're kind of floating in that God presence, you might say. So all of that, again, I talked about increasing perception. We have to transform our own awareness we can do various techniques, that there's many techniques that people can practice, and I practice some, and there's many, I won't discuss all of them here, but there's definitely things that people can practice that increase our perception, and just basically simple things of taking our body and making sure it's in good shape and so on. So I've gone 24 minutes on this video. I'll just cover a real few basic things here. Certain tools that are fun to play with. This is actually for aviation, but when you apply these different numbers and geometry to our planet, and people start looking up in the old days, when they start to look up a star, they'd show an angle. Okay, well, how far above the horizon is a certain star up here? And then they would make that angle. They'd learn how to measure stuff, and then they'd realize, hey, after a while they realize, well, the Earth must be a globe, or at least it rotates like a sphere. So all of these really simple observations eventually led to some very, very complex knowledge that has been passed down to us. I mean, just look at this book on symbols. This is just one book of symbols. I mean, it's just amazing. And this book and this book and look at this book. So you can explore these things for a whole lifetime. And I'm just trying to whet people's appetite a little bit and try to explore some things. Because, again, perception, coming back to our perception, we need to learn how to meditate and settle ourselves so that our mind, the word mind is very misunderstood a lot of ways. Maybe I won't even use that word, but just our awareness, our personal perception and consciousness. There's a lot you can do with it, by constructing your thoughts in a really hard way and, doing math and so on. But then there's another part of our awareness that needs to be free-flowing and fluid, and that has to do with meditation and just being not identified with anything. So, again, I'm going to make this shorten this video here. Reminder of the 4 subjects of the quadrivium: shapes, vibrations, music, symbols, sacred geometry, things are used in navigation, in art, architecture. Once you start to get into a mode where you can grasp some of these symbols, for example, you might say, here's a sphere. Basically, there's a circle. There's representing some cyclical thing here. A tree is a symbol because there's a branching effect that happens and all that. So there's interlocking spheres, and then there's the solar system and its vibration. And when you see that even more complex artistic figures and drawings have some really basic symbols in them, like the trees here, the sword represents something, and the cloud. So you have a vast range of knowledge by taking some of these symbols and kind of running with them. So I guess I'll leave it there for now. I'm going to make some more drawings, and I'm going to try to add some pictures when I do my final cut here. I try to make these videos really simple so I can load them up quickly. And again, thank you again for watching. I appreciate anybody sharing. We get censored, as you know, and we're just a small group here. As you know, all of us trying to do our little thing and bring a little light out here. But I'm going to expand in this in many more drawings in the future, and I'll cover some different books in my next episode. So thanks again for watching. Please like and share.